Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and welcome to another episode of Data Nation, where I talk about whatever I want to talk about when it comes to data. Now, on this episode, I want to talk about why are catalogs so hot right now. What does that mean? Basically, right now, if you've been paying attention to sort of like news in the data architecture space, it's just been one catalog announcement after the next. So, why are catalogs such a big deal? What are catalogs? These are the kind of questions that I'd like to answer during this episode. So first off, let's just talk about the evolution of the word catalog. So let's say in the beginning, catalogs were just a part of the abstraction that is a database and data warehouse. You just didn't even think about it, okay? When you would access a database like Postgres or access a data warehouse like Snowflake, you would just know that the system knows that I have table A, table B, table C. Like it just knew which data sets existed, and it was just part of how things worked. It wasn't its own thing. Okay? And because most of the time, up until really like the last, let's say, 10 years, we generally would only operate out of a handful of systems. You'd swap one database out for another or one data warehouse for another, but you'd have one system. So you weren't necessarily as concerned about interoperability or managing data across several different places. So the first iteration of trying to solve the problem of having data in a lot of places, as that became more and more of a thing, were what's referred to as an enterprise data catalog. These are companies like Colibra, Alation, and others. And essentially, what they do is they provide essentially a central sort of data uh, dictionary, in the sense that I have a place where I can, and probably dictionary is the wrong word because there's a thing called data dictionary, which is more like a glossary of terms and understanding of things. More what I'm talking about is a data catalog, in the sense that, like, if you think of a catalog like you used to get from like a J.C. Penney's or a Macy's, what would it do? I'd be able to kind of look through all the different products that J.C. Penney's or Macy's would have. I'd be able to go get those products and so forth. And that's essentially what an enterprise data catalog is. It's a place for me to say, hey, these are the data sets that are available across all my data sources. So I'd be going on Calibra and being able to see, hey, this table here, a description of what that data set is, some other information about it, like, oh, it's on a Postgres database somewhere. And then be able like to hit a button and say, hey, I'd like access to it. And then send that request to the appropriate person who would then give me access to it. Okay, but the tool itself isn't the thing that gives me access. It's just the thing that helps intermediate access to the data. So an enterprise data catalog like, again, Alation or Calibra isn't where I necessarily query the data. It's where I can go discover the data, request access, and then go access the data where it actually is, however I want to do it. And that's fine. And that's still very popular and still very necessary. Um, but catalogs in recent years, when it came to the lakehouse, took on a different term, because now you had lakehouses, which were essentially deconstructed databases. They took that database or data warehouse and broke it up into all its individual pieces. So as I mentioned before, you'd use a database or a data warehouse, and it just knew that you had all these data sets. So that part had to be kind of rebuilt for the lake house. So you'd have to have a catalog on the lake house that knew which data sets you had, because now the compute was separate from the storage, and the storage is separate from the catalog, and then basically storage was really just, you're just storing like Parquet files, so you need some sort of abstraction to kind of tell, hey, which files are table A and table B. That's a table format. So you had all these different pieces that normally would be one system broken up into individual parts. Okay, it's kind of like if, instead of selling you a car, I sold you, the engine, the muffler, the body kit, all the pieces separately, and you built your own car based on the pieces you wanted. Okay, essentially that's what a lake house is. A lake house is basically buying the car in pieces. So first piece was sort of like, I need somewhere to store the data. Okay, essentially, that would be your object storage, your HDFS. And once I had that, I had to figure out, okay, now that I have a place to put the data, where am I going to store the data? And that'd be like Parquet files, these data files that are really good for analytics type workloads. But the problem is the Parquet files, my data is across, maybe my sales data is across 1,000 Parquet files. How does a tool know that those 1,000 Parquet files are one data set? That's where I need a table format, like an Apache Iceberg. Okay, but now I have a sales table, an orders table, some other table. How do my tools like a Dremio or a Snowflake know that all these tables exist? That's where the catalog comes to play. It's a listing. It allows you to list all your different things. So now that the catalog becomes its own thing, so this would be tools like Merced, like Polaris, like Unity, like Hive. Now that you have this thing that can independently track all your different data sets and different assets that you have in your lakehouse, now I can take that basket of stuff, take it over to Dremio, and now Dremio knows, hey, I got these 10 tables. I can go take it over to Spark. Spark now knows I have these 10 tables. I don't have to describe what assets I have to every tool that I use. That's value number one of this new category of lakehouse catalog. So again, there's the enterprise data catalogs, like the sort of intermediate interface for users to discover data. Then there's lakehouse catalogs, this sort of digital interface for tools to know what's available. So that way your tool can just immediately understand, hey, I got these 10 tables. And that is good. And this is essentially the role that things like Hive and Merced and others have played up till now. But what makes them extra exciting now is that now that people are starting to move to the lakehouse, they've ran into a problem. And that's governance. And the challenge with governance is that basically, absent some other abstraction, you would have to reestablish the rules for who, because most tools set those access rules at the engine level. So you'd be setting, okay, this user can access this on Dremio, then setting this user can access this on Spark, then setting that up on Snowflake, then setting that up on so forth and so forth. That is not really like a maintainable way of doing things, because you might remember to set all your access rules right in one place but forgot to set them in another, and it becomes a mess. So the idea is you need a place that can not just know what tables you have, but know who can access them. And that's become, and the industry's kind of agreed that that place is the catalog. Okay, basically all the other stuff that needs to be portable becomes the realm of the catalog. So in the future, probably things like lineage and other types of metadata will also be handled by catalog. But sort of the next big thing is sort of like governance at the catalog level. Okay. And you can get this in sort of two flavors. You know, I mean, some of these open source catalogs have these features built in. Like a Polaris catalog has RBAC built in. So you can actually set who can access the individual data sets and create users referred to as principals and say, hey, these, and then all your data is in separate different catalogs, and then each principal can have different levels of access to each catalog. And that makes it nice, because if I go to Dremio or I go to Snowflake, that user is going to have the same level of access in either place. I don't have to define my access rules more than once. So that's the nice thing about having a catalog. Also, being able to have catalogs compete is easier than ever because you have something called the Iceberg REST spec. So instead of every catalog having to create its own complete connector for every different catalog, pretty much you have the same primitive sort of starting point, which is the Iceberg REST catalog spec. So a similar sort of way of talking between tools. Okay, it's kind of like, it's much easier for me to talk to a lot of people if we all speak the same language. It's a lot easier for tools to use a lot of different catalogs if they speak the same interface, and that is the REST catalog spec. So with that, you now have catalogs that become much more usable in lots more places, giving you a lot more competition, where you're trying to see like a lot of these catalogs really kind of push the envelope as far as feature sets. You have Merced with its sort of Git-like catalog versioning. You have Polaris with its RBAC and external catalogs. You have Unity, which basically is a Delta Lake catalog, but allows you to kind of expose some of that as Iceberg through a feature called Uniform. You have Gravitino, which is trying to offer like geo-distribution of its deployment and the ability to kind of federate with the Hive catalog. All sorts of other sort of interesting choices out there. There's also one called Lake Keeper that's from a company called Hansen Tag. I don't know, that's written in Rust. That's pretty much the extent of what I know about it currently. And a few others. Like there's just a lot of different catalog options out there now competing in this particular space. They want to be the way that you track your lakehouse assets and govern them. Okay? But at the end of the day, like the actual open source implementations, oftentimes probably not what you're going to go with. You want the open source technology because you want to be able to go to that open source technology if a vendor starts playing, shame, 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 bad, bad. They start, raising the prices on you. They start not giving you quality service. You want to have an exit hatch. That's the importance of having that underlying open source piece. But really, it's oftentimes you're going to go with the managed offering because you don't want to have to manage the deployment. You don't want to have to do all this stuff. And so you do have managed offerings. Like probably the initial managed offerings were cloud-based, which included Tabular and Dremio Arctic, which is the original sort of Dremio catalog on the Dremio cloud platform. And these offered you not only the catalog, but they also did provide you this other really important value that makes these catalogs really valuable is they help you maintain those data assets. So now you have a thing that's listing your different data assets. So I know which tables I have. 2, governing those assets. And 3, optimizing those assets. Okay, because without a catalog that optimizes your tables, then you're optimizing them yourself, which can be a very tedious, very sort of trial and error kind of thing that a lot of data engineers end up spending a way more time on, which kind of then negates the other values of a lakehouse. So in that case, if you can eliminate this sort of having to think through the optimization of your lakehouse because you have a tool that kind of automates that away for you, that's tremendously valuable. It makes implementing and using a lakehouse in production much, much easier. And that's generally the realm of managed catalogs. They provide you the catalog, they provide you the governance, but because it's managed, they can also provide you the optimization piece. So this would be, originally it was Tabular and Dremio Arctic, but they were cloud only. Dremio Arctic is now called Dremio Catalog in Cloud. So basically you have 2 versions of Dremio Catalog, the cloud only version, and this new version I'm about to talk about in a moment. But then since then you also have Snowflake kind of coming with their managed Polaris service called Open Catalog. You have Databricks' managed Unity service, which is called, it's just Unity Catalog. You have most of the cloud vendors having sort of some managed catalog offering kind of built into them now. You have, and then most of those are all cloud only. You're only working with cloud stored data sets. So this is what makes like the newest advancement in this space, the Dremio catalog, the Dremio hybrid catalog, which is part of the Dremio software product, so interesting. Because this is going to be the first time where you have a managed catalog offering that brings to you the governance, the optimization, the tracking of your assets that can be connected throughout the ecosystem, but brings it to a way that can catalog Iceberg tables that exist in your cloud storage locations and in your on-prem data locations, and allow you to kind of track and govern all those data sets in sort of one catalog that you can then make available to your end users. Okay, doesn't necessarily mean like every tool, because again, there's also limitations on the tool side, whether they can actually even read certain locations, but the idea is you have them all cataloged there, you can govern them there, and in places where they will work, they will be subject to the same governing rules, which makes life a lot easier. Okay, so now you're in this world where basically hybrid lakehouses are becoming more of a thing because sometimes you have data that you're going to hold for a very long time, so it's just a lot cheaper to put it on-prem, okay, or in cold storage. In the cloud is a possibility, but oftentimes even depending on the size of the data, it could even be even cheaper through some sort of on-prem or managed private cloud offering. Or you might need the data accessible really fast somewhere that there isn't really a good region with your cloud provider. So using a private cloud or on-prem offering that's more physically closerly located to where that processing going on. There's lots of different reasons you might have data in the cloud and on-prem and move that data in between. And being able to have a catalog that allows you to kind of move in between those locations is going to be tremendously valuable, which makes the Dremio catalog piece so exciting. So if you have data on-prem, this is definitely something you should be looking at and thinking about. But overall, this is just like the beginning of just like a whole world of this sort of catalog space evolving. In the future, right now, you're starting to see, again, the management, the governance, and the listing of assets that these catalogs do. But in the future, you're going to see these catalogs take on roles like scan planning acceleration, things like that, especially when you start seeing like the next iteration of the Iceberg REST spec, which introduces this new sort of thing that doesn't exist right now. It exists when that spec gets released, called the scan planning endpoint, where basically catalogs can do more of the planning, which opens up all sorts of doors I'm not going to get into now. But the bottom line is catalogs are hot. They're going to be hot for at least the next couple of years. So it's definitely a space to keep an eye on. I'll see you all later. If you guys like this podcast, share it with a friend. I'll talk to you later. Have a great day and enjoy.